Welcome back. We are ready for the next part. We're going to read chapter 13, and chapter 13 is about the 4th of July parade. Have you ever been in a parade? Have you ever wanted to be in a parade? Sounds like kind of a lot of fun. But Jonas and Dale had kind of thought, that might be something they could do. It was not really anything they had planned on doing. But we're going to find out what they do with the 4th of July parade. Before we get started on that, I wanted to share just some author tips with you. Authors have to do research, particularly if it is involving history and they want to tell the correct facts. So one of the things that I did when I was writing this book was find some books that had pictures. When Jonas and Dale went to the library, one of the most beneficial books to them was one that they found some pictures in. Well, I was able to find some books, and this particular book is called Lincoln County, North Carolina, and it has all kinds of old pictures in there. By looking at these pictures, I was able to do several things. First of all, I could see the names of people. Of course, I was looking for John Sifford. I didn't find him or any of his family, but there was a lot of other interesting information. When I was looking for the names of streets, when I was looking for the names of businesses, I could look at these pictures and find the actual names of those places. One picture that I want to show you is this particular picture. Now, you can't see it very well, but in this picture, there are some children who are in a parade. In fact, when I go through this book, there are lots of parade pictures. So they were very important to the people. That was a very important thing when the parade came to town. Everybody would come and they would decorate with floats and stuff. A lot of times they had wagons that they would decorate, and they would be pulled by horses, and they would decorate the horses. And there were all kinds of things that they would put into the parade to show their pride. Well, that little picture that I showed you has some kids in it. And I write about that in the book. So hopefully you'll pick up on that. I was able to look at the picture, look at what they were wearing, and describe that for the readers. One of the main jobs of an author is to take what they see, what they feel, what they hear, all of those emotions, take all of that and put it into words so that the reader will be able to experience the same thing that the author has experienced. So let's get started on chapter 13. It is called the 4th of July Parade. The month of June was over, and Jonas and Dale wondered what they would be doing the remainder of the summer. The boys walked in front of the library and saw the newspaper stand for the Lincoln Times News. The headline said, "Local children prepare for July 4th parade." "Children's parade? Where?" asked Jonas. The boys stopped to read the information through the newspaper stand window. It said the 4th of July parade would go down East Main Street. All Lincoln County children were invited to be in the parade. "Let's be in the parade, Dale," said Jonas. While he was excited about the possibility of being in the parade, Dale was not so sure about it. "What would we do in the parade?" Dale asked. "I don't know. Let's think about it." Jonas just knew there was something they could do for the parade. The boys talked about several ideas and finally decided they would decorate their bicycles with red, white, and blue streamers and small American flags. But first, they would have to get permission from their parents. Once the boys decided what they wanted to do, they took off running. "I'll meet you in front of your house at 9 o'clock in the morning so we can go to Rose's Variety Store and get our stuff for the parade. I've got money in my piggy bank," said Jonas. "Me too," said Dale. "See you at 9. The boys met as planned at 9 a.m. and rode their bicycles to Rose's. They purchased red, white, and blue streamers and small flags to put in the ends of their handlebars. They spent the remainder of the day decorating their bicycles and test driving them down the street. They even clipped playing cards to their tire spokes with clothespins so they made a noise like a motor. They were proud of their work and could hardly wait for the next day so they could show off their bicycles in the parade. The 4th of July parade was scheduled to begin promptly at 10 a.m. Children in the parade were told to meet at the corner of Edward Street and East Main at 9:30 a.m. The morning of the parade, Jonas and Dale rode their bicycles down the street with streamers and flags flying in the wind. The parents said they would be waiting near the courthouse after the parade. "This is going to be fun," Jonas said to Dale as they rode down the street. There was a lot of excitement in the air. American flags were flying in front of businesses along East Main Street. Many homes had flags on their front porches. People who walked down the streets going to the parade were dressed in red, white, and blue and carrying small flags. Everyone seemed happy that day. Jonas and Dale had learned a lot about America in the last few days. The treasure chest had opened up a whole new world for them. Not only had the treasure chest contained items of historical value, it had also provided Jonas and Dale with a respect for the past and an appreciation for early immigrants. Those were treasures they could not hold in their hands, but they could carry them with them in their hearts for the rest of their lives. Although the boys were only 10 years old, they knew more about the local history of Lincolnton than most citizens. The Diary of Joachim Sifford helped them to visualize the lives of the early American settlers. Leonard Sifford was their age when he came to America. He must have been excited to sail on a big ship. They felt like they knew Joachim, Leonard, and John, and they wished they had had an opportunity to meet them. The parade began at 10 a.m. as scheduled. People of all ages were standing on the curbs and sidewalks, waving flags and smiling. Leading the parade were 4 boys about 8 years old, dressed in outfits that looked like uniforms for the Navy, Army, Marines, and Coast Guard. A girl was dressed in a Red Cross uniform. They each carried an American flag or something to complete their costume that represented the branch of the military in which they were dressed. One boy marched with a wooden rifle on his shoulder, and the boy wearing the Navy uniform carried an American flag. Next in the parade was the marching band from Lincolnton High School, along with the majorettes, the girls with the twirling batons. They all stepped in time with the music. Between songs, the drums would continue the beat until the rest of the band started another song. Everyone on the streets clapped their hands along with the music. Right behind the LHS band was the football team wearing their brand new jerseys. The Lincolnton High School cheerleaders bounced along beside them, shaking their black and gold pom-poms and yelling, "Go Wolves!" Then it was time for the decorated bicycles. Jonas and Dale were at the front of the group. There were at least 50 bicycles in the parade, and each one of them was decorated with streamers and flags. Jonas and Dale looked at the people on the streets to see if there was anyone they knew so they could wave at them. From time to time, they saw someone they knew from school or church, and they waved and smiled. When they got close to Poplar Street, they saw Mr. and Mrs. Sifford. They each waved a small American flag, and Jonas and Dale waved back. They were all proud Americans on that Independence Day. The parade turned at the Lincoln County Courthouse and ended soon after that. The boys' parents found them and told them how proud they were of them being in the parade. The boys parked their bicycles in a bike rack close to the courthouse and walked down East Main Street to find a place under a large tree to cool off and watch the remainder of the parade. "Jonas, Dale," shouted a voice in the crowd. "Boys, you looked great," said Mr. Sifford. He and Mrs. Sifford were smiling and still waving their flags. "Thanks," the boys said in unison. "I'm glad your parents are here. I have some good news for all of you," Mr. Sifford said. "I have a friend from Lincoln County Museum who would like to meet with all of us one evening next week. Do you think you could come over to my house Tuesday evening about 6:30? They all looked at each other and nodded. Sure, said Jonas's dad. We should be able to be there. Great, Mr. Sifford said with a smile. Virginia will make us some dessert and coffee, and we always have plenty of cold milk for you boys. We look forward to seeing you Tuesday at 6:30. The remainder of the day was spent with family and friends in the neighborhood. The children played in the water sprinklers to cool off and have fun. The adults fired up the grills and fixed hamburgers and hot dogs. Homemade ice cream was made in the ice cream makers that required crushed ice, rock salt, and a good strong arm for cranking until the milk mixture turned into ice cream. Around 9 p.m. in the neighborhood came alive with firecrackers and bottle rockets. The two boys had stars in their eyes that night. For the first time, Independence Day meant more than just a parade, a picnic, and fireworks to Jonas and Dale. It meant freedom, pride in their country, and an opportunity to follow their dreams. It had been a great day for Jonas and Dale. Chapter 14. On Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m., Jonas, Dale, and their parents arrived at Mr. Sifford's house. Dale rang the doorbell, and Mr. Sifford quickly opened the door. Greetings were exchanged, and they all made their way into the dining room. Mr. Sifford had cleared off the dining table so that everyone could gather around it and discuss the treasure. They all sat down except for Mrs. Sifford and the man from the Lincoln County Museum. He introduced himself as Clarence Alexander. Mrs. Sifford served all the guests a slice of homemade chocolate cake. The adults had coffee and the boys had a glass of cold milk. Mr. Alexander began by saying, "Thank you for coming here this evening. Last week, Harry asked me to stop by to see what he called something of historical interest. Harry's always coming up with something interesting, and so I was happy to stop by to see what he had. He started by showing me the small wooden box that you boys found by the creek and its contents. And then he showed me the large chest that you found in the horse stable on the other side of the creek." Mr. Alexander walked over to the table where all the items were laying out on the velvet cloth. Jonas and Dale's parents were seeing those items for the first time. They stretched their necks and looked at them the best they could. Mr. Alexander picked up the pouch of coins and brought it to the table. These coins are in incredible shape. They were minted in Charlotte in 1839 and are very rare. In today's market, these coins are worth about $800 each. The market value goes up and down every day, so that value will change over time. There are 30 coins here for a total value of $24,000. "Holy smokes," cried Jonas. "We're rich." "Well, let's not get too excited yet," said Jonas's dad. "You and Dale found the treasure, but it may not belong to you. Let's see what Mr. Alexander has to tell us." "Gee whiz," said Jonas. He was disappointed, and Dale's broad smile turned into a look of disappointment. Mr. Alexander continued, "Your dad is right, Jonas. The treasure was found on property still owned by the Sifford family. Although you found the treasure chest, legally it belongs to the landowner. But let's continue with the other items." The next items Mr. Alexander brought over to the dining table were the German Bible and the jar of papers. He opened the jar and laid the contents onto the table. The value of these items is more of a historical rather than a monetary value. They show historians the cost of land, tools, supplies, and farm animals from about 1835 until 1846. This is also a rare find and of great interest to those of us who study history. The German Bible falls into the same category as the receipts and deeds. The Bible has a sentimental value that cannot be measured in dollars. The Sifford family would be thrilled to know that you found it. They have heard They have heard in family stories over the years that this Bible existed, but they had never been able to locate it. The American flag is of sentimental and historical value. It has become thin and fragile over the years and must be stored properly so that it doesn't continue to deteriorate and tear. I can help with that, and will tell you more about that in just a minute. Mr. Alexander said as he carefully placed the flag on the dining table for everyone to see. And now we come to the diary of Joachim Sifford. The diary is full of detailed information about the Sifford family, as well as the German way of life, both in Germany and in America. It gives us an idea of why so many Germans arrived in America around 1750. It tells us the weather conditions were so severe that the animals and crops died. As you know, without animals and crops for food, the families could not survive. They had to make a hard decision on whether to stay in Germany or move to America. It must have been difficult leaving other family members and friends in Germany and moving to a land far away. But on the other hand, they had much to look forward to in America. Sometimes people make sacrifices in order to gain freedom and opportunity. America was full of both. With that said, Mr. Alexander sat down in the chair at the head of the table. "Mr. Alexander, I have a question for you," said Jonas. "Why was that first small wooden box in a different place by the creek?" "Great question, Jonas," said Mr. Alexander. "The small wooden box was probably somewhere in the old Sifford house. That house is gone now because in 1916 we had a terrible flood in that area. Many houses, including the old Sifford house, were washed away. And as the water went down, many things from inside those old structures ended up in the creek bed. We've actually found numerous things down there over the years. That wooden box was probably buried under enough dirt and rocks that it remained hidden until your sharp eyes spotted it." "I have a question for you too, Mr. Alexander," said Dale. "Why did John Sifford bury his treasure in the horse stable?" "Well, that's another great question, Dale. You two boys have been doing some serious thinking, I see," said Mr. Alexander. "We don't know for sure the answer to that question. Storms, fires, Indian raids, and the Civil War are just a few of the hardships they experienced. John Sifford was a smart man. He knew that it was possible that something could happen to him, his family, or his home, and he wanted to make sure that he had the items that were of value to him in a safe place away from the main house. The coins would help his family with food and shelter. The other items showed he was a proud American and that he did not want future generations to forget his family and how they came to America before the American Revolution. It is possible that over the years he forgot about the treasure in the horse stable, or John Sifford may have kept it a secret, believing that his family would find the treasure map once he died. I am sure he never dreamed it would take over 100 years to discover." Everyone sat for a few moments in silence. "So what do you suggest we do next, Clarence?" asked Mr. Sifford. Mr. Alexander spoke in a hushed voice. "I've already spoken with the family that owns that property now. They were thrilled that you two boys, along with Mr. Sifford, found the treasure that they thought was just a family legend." Mr. Alexander stood up and looked at Jonas and Dale as he continued. "They have requested 3 things. First of all, they have asked that all the items be placed in the Lincoln County Museum, along with a story about how you discovered the treasure chest and its contents. Next, they would like the Lincoln Times-News to write a feature story about you and tell the whole community that you two boys are successful treasure hunters. And last of all, they would like to present each of you with a check for $500 as a reward and payment for your hard work in discovering the treasure." No kidding? $500? Jonas and Dale asked at the same time. No kidding, said Mr. Alexander. He looked over at Mr. Sifford. Harry, they would like to offer the same to you as well. Mr. Sifford smiled. I appreciate that very much, but I have been rewarded enough. Being a part of this experience has been a thrill. Virginia and I received our own reward by getting to know Jonas and Dale and their families. I have learned over the years that the most valuable things in life are not money or possessions. The most valuable things in our lives are the ones we love, including, The most valuable things in our lives are the ones we love, including our families, this community, and our friends, and the good old US of A. I think John Sifford was trying to tell us that when he preserved the flag, the Bible, and his grandfather's diary. Even then, he knew what was truly important. If you don't mind, said Mr. Sifford with tears in his eyes, I'd like to split my reward with the two of you boys. He looked at Jonas and Dale and smiled. The boys jumped up from the table and gave Mr. Sifford a hug. You're the best friend ever, said Dale. Jonas had tears in his eyes and couldn't say a word. All right, that's all we will read on this part. We are down to our last chapter, chapter 15, and I will be back shortly, and we will finish The Lost Treasure of Lincoln County.